All right. Well, welcome to the Idea Lab. My name is Jacob Eckeberger. I'm the Director of Resource Development for Youth Specialties. And if you don't know about this space is the place where ideas are brought to you. They're super practical, easy to use, and really, really important resources for every youth worker. And so I'm so glad to have Charles Poker Boyd with us talking about something really important. Equip, his new book, Leadership, Lead Teams, and Longevity in Youth Ministry. So, Charles, thanks for being a part of this, man.
Oh, glad to be here.
Yeah. First, tell us just a quick 30-second snippet of what's your story in youth ministry, a little bit of your background.
Well, my story began back in 1982, and then from college, God called me into youth ministry, so I felt like, okay, now I got to go back to school, so I went to seminary, and then, began to serve part-time and then full-time, and mine's a pretty traditional track, I started out in the School of Criminology to get a criminology degree, and so I ended up with that degree. I'm like, okay, now I'm in youth ministry, I'm supposed to go back and get a youth ministry degree, so I said, well, I'll just be on the preventive side, instead of the custodial side. So I was in the local church 26 years, and then been doing consulting while I was teaching youth ministry. And then when we moved, it just seemed like the time to do it full time. It got to where it was a flip flop. So now I actually volunteer as an 8th grade teacher and do consulting full time. So.
Well, in your book, Equip, it's such an important resource. I've got a note. I need to read it from my phone because I don't want to mess it up.
Right, good.
So in your new book, Equip, you state that every youth ministry will rise or fall depending on the leadership commitment to 4 essentials. So could you walk us through what those 4 essentials are?
Yeah, well, everybody's got hunches of what the youth ministry rises and falls on. So we took a lot of surveys, we did a lot of research on, let's find out from guys who've been in the same position for 7 or more years. We wanted to do 12 years, but we didn't have a big enough sampling. Yeah. So we took dropping it back until we got to 7. We thought, okay, at least 5 is good veteran youth ministry. Let's go for 7. And so we got a good sampling, and those essentials basically are self-development, which is taking care of yourself, not only spiritually fit, but fit the things that go into being developing yourself as a spiritual fit person to lead youth ministry, taking care of the home base. And then other development, which is the recruiting and equipping and caring for the leaders that are going to allow you to stay in it for the long haul. Otherwise, you're going to be a casualty shortly without a lead team, a leadership team to help you and take that resource. And then also after your self-development and other development, and then managing well, learning that administrative side that so often we youth ministers, we like the people side, we love the preaching side, the engagement side, but that administrative side, if it doesn't come natural, you too will be a casualty. So we have to develop some of those skills that we don't naturally really like, but we do. And then in my book, I call it gospelizing. I like the term, but evangelism. Screening everything and filtering what we do for the ultimate goal of winning people to Christ, which the gentleman before me was talking about, making sure that our filters are up in a healthy way in order to do good ministry for the long term.
So there are 4 elements in your new book, and I know that you love all 4 of them, but if you had to just focus on 2, just for the sake of our time, what are your 2 most essential of those elements?
Yeah, that's good. I would say probably personal development, self-development, because we can't really do it in the others effectively without first being the person God wants us to become and continually. It's part of that looking at our spiritual habits and clinging to the good ones and continuing to start them. I tell guys, it doesn't matter how many times you have to reignite your quiet time, you got to do it. There's never a bad time to reignite a good quiet time. That's self-development, but that piggybacks right onto other development, so that when you take care of self, then you can go and recruit and care for other people well to be on your team.
So, taking a bigger look at the world of youth ministry, what's the most encouraging trend that you see in youth ministry?
Well, I tell you what, the millennials, the most encouraging trend I see, not only veteran youth ministers, but especially the young youth ministers, we've become, and they've become the initiators of being content creators. Youth guys today, they not only it's natural for them to seem to create content, but it's a natural fit for them at this season in ministry and technology and all. That's not only a good fit for them in youth ministry, but it's a good fit with that age group that are thinking outside the box naturally about, back in the day, there was a couple of different models, and you could kind of adapt whichever one you wanted and kind of apply your flavor to it, and that was about it. Right. But today, man, we got content creators and think out of the box, and they adapt to what they've got. It's not a one-size-fits-all or even most. It's what fits my locale where I'm doing ministry. Now, there's some principles, of course, the 4 pillars, but applying that is really fun to watch, especially with young youth guys, and watching some veteran guys my age go, you know what? If they'll teach me how to do Instagram, I think I could really use that,
So are you on Snapchat then?
Snapchat, Instagram, yeah.
So if we flip that question, what's the most concerning thing about youth ministry right now?
I would say the most concerning thing in youth ministry on the staff side, on the minister side, is probably the number of guys who are being called to ministry and it feels rushed to do their passion, to express their passion. And 2 years into it, the hurricanes of life and ministry come, and they're just ill-equipped to ride those rough waves out because of lack of training. And churches are enthusiastic. One of them is talking about the budgets are down, things are down. So sometimes they're like, hey, who can we just hire to put in this position for now? And so sometimes they're getting guys, and the guys are passionate. They could learn a lot, they do a lot, but the churches are skipping over that educational part and doing a disservice to some of the guys who do that. So we've tried to apply that in the book. On the student side, I think one of the most scary and challenging is just the continual onslaught of over-sexualization of everything in their culture. It doesn't seem like you can't go a week without a new app where guys are able to access pornography, and just the whole, everything has just become so immodest in discussion and stuff that they're dealing with an entire sexualized society that seems normal to them. But to anybody, you're like, gosh, this is incredible. And it's something that's made youth ministry more complex in a lot of ways, because the youth ministry is having to become a mini expert in a lot of areas that it used to didn't be that complicated.
And I love that your book is packed full of lots of different types of resources that span so many different ministry settings. So if you had to focus on one to share with us in the Idea Lab, what's one that contributes the most to the world of youth ministry?
Well, one of the things that we wrote the book for was because we felt like most of the guys that we interviewed that struggled was getting ahead of the administration part. Mm-hmm. And so this is sort of a nuts and bolts of a how-to. Sure. It starts with the history of youth ministry, so young guys can look and say, hey, here's where we came from. There's some guys who lost their legs and limbs, and to this pastor or to that church, paving the way that I felt like they paved the way for me. But then there's this whole new generation where there's been some stuff. So we did that history and then jump right into the nuts and bolts of applying. But the one thing overall is probably the establishment and recruiting of leadership people, volunteers. We call it lead team ministry. Richard Ross did us a great favor 25 years ago with introducing lead team ministry. I tried to get him to write the book. He said, I'm too old, you write the book. I'm like, I thought I was too old, I want somebody else to write the book. So we had a good time, and so the strategy of being able to recruit, pull people off of the sidelines, and used to we like slice the pie up how we wanted and say, do you fit into this slice of the pie? And that's how you can serve in youth ministry. We learned you can slice that pie 20 different times and give a slice out to somebody that fits their calling and their passions, whether they've got 3 hours a week, 1 hour a week, but pulling them off the sideline and placing them in ministry to teenagers.
And you've also added an assessment guide. It's a 21-point assessment guide, right?
Yes, this came out of our research.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. Well, we have a 21-point assessment guide. In fact, my son, who's a youth pastor, said, hey, Dad, I'd get the book just for that. I don't know about the other stuff, because he's heard it all his life. But we almost didn't put it in there because we're about to roll this thing out online, where we want to make available to every youth minister, every leader, to be able to go online and punch the information in less than 20 minutes. And some have taken less than 10 minutes testing it and let the computer crunch the data for you, all based on research to say, hey, at the end you get a report and it says, here's what you're doing well. You scored this. Here's something you might know. And you may already have a hunch. You know what? I know this, but I want this to tell me that. And here's some resources. We don't just leave you hanging on the assessment. We say, well, here's the answers in the book. Here's the answers in some online resources that will help you take your vision for youth ministry to the next level based on your place, what you're doing to personalize it.
So you interact with youth workers and all across the world of youth ministry. If you could convince every single one of them of one thing, what would that one thing be?
That what you do matters. That what you do will reflect on the future of our churches and our country. That you're the most misunderstood, represented group that will change our nation through the gospelizing because of teenagers, your work with teenagers, that relational side and that administering side, week in, week out, the development. If I could tell them one thing, is that what you do matters for eternity. It matters huge. And we just don't get told that a lot, especially when you're prepping and you think you've got those 3 hours carved out to prep for Wednesday night, and then there's a crisis. So there went your 3 hours, but you still got to be on. And so I love youth pastors. I love to be their advocates, and that's what we do at SME.
And so people can find you at smeonline.net.
That's right.
Right? Yeah. And where's your booth from here?
601, right down here.
601. Okay. Tell us a little bit about when they come to your booth here at NYWC. Did I hear that you're doing something special with this book?
We are. We got these are on sale for $12 discount here, and $15 for the hardback, $12
Perfect.
for the softback. It's just been picked up by a couple of universities to be the required textbook for youth ministry programming.
Yeah.
I used to teach the course, and I always had to adopt a leadership book and adapt it to the course. And so we thought, we'll just write one for that, and that's kind of part of the reason it came out.
That's incredible. So what's one question I didn't think to ask you that's really important for you? Maybe it's a bit of encouragement that you want to share. Maybe it's something that, an extension of that one thing you want to convince every youth worker of. But what's one thing you want to leave us with?
Oh, I'd say that take heart in the high times. Know that just live the joy and enjoy it, and let God use you to just fly like that. In the down times, don't let Satan take that. If he wants to convince, if the Holy Spirit wants to convince you to change something or adjust something, awesome. But don't let Satan speak into you a quitting, or I got to give this up because of a parent or because of youth or a failure, or you gave your own self a black eye. They're going to come. I feel like I need to write the first 2 churches I served and just apologize and say thank you. So don't get out. We need a healthy veteran staff of youth ministers that start, whether it's 19 or 20, and go up to retirement. We're just now starting to see the first group of retired youth pastors. We didn't think that would ever come. I'd love to be able to look back when I retire and say, remember when the average youth span was 3.1 years? And the life expectancy of a youth pastor was less than that of a pro quarterback, was 6.8 years? Look at it now, it's like 14 years, it's 15 years. That would be an awesome way to go. I'd love to be on my deathbed and go, yeah, it's up to 15 years. We got guys staying in it,
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Charles. Let's give him a hand.
Yeah, thank you.